Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our podcast called Everything Real Estate. Today is Tuesday, June 4th, 2024, and this is episode 11. I'm Kara Kaufman, the broker and owner of Care Home Team Real Estate, and I am your host. At Care Home Team Real Estate, we care about many things. Potential clients being educated about the buying or selling process so they know what is coming next. We also care about their situations and how we can best serve them. Our clients become friends and family for as long as they want to. And we care about our fellow agents and their partners, and we care about our community. And we're so thankful that you are joining us live or later via our YouTube channel or Spotify. Our guest speaker today is Mary Sladek. She is the owner of My Insurance in Omaha, an independent insurance agency specializing in personal lines, which include home, auto, and specialty coverages. They represent multiple national and regional carriers to offer several options for your coverage. Welcome aboard, Mary.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you with us. So if you would just tell us a little bit about you, your family, what brought you to insurance?
Well, gosh, I have been in insurance for about just almost 25 years. Prior to that, I was in finance banking, and this was an easy transition to go into insurance. And selling financial products is here's a piece of paper and trust me situation, right? So
Yep.
you have to have integrity. You have to have a good following of people who trust you and who believe in you. So I've been very fortunate in my professional career to have lots of people around me that have referred their friends and family to us over the years. I'm married, been married for almost 25 years, and I have 2 grown daughters and 5 grandkids. So
Nice.
That's me really busy with all their activities.
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
And did you say how long you've been in insurance?
About 25 years. Yeah, I was
Okay.
I was previously with a captive carrier, which is, we refer to captive and independents. Captive are the companies that only offer one product, like an Allstate or Farmers, State Farm. Those carriers, they don't have a plethora of options for you. They have the one company that they represent. And after about 10 years doing that, I felt like it was time. I had the experience to move to the other side of the fence and start working independently. So we contract with a variety of carriers, and we work directly with those carriers. So we're not a brokerage. We are not, a lot of agents say, well, we've got 35 different carriers that we represent, which is true, but they're like a middleman for those carriers. So they don't have direct relationships with those carriers. They work through a larger firm or a larger brokerage, where we are directly contracted with our carriers and have a great relationship with them.
Very good. So what is the reason that homeowners insurance is so important that lenders require buyers to have it when they purchase a home?
Well, obviously, that's probably the biggest purchase any of us will ever make in our lifetime. It's our most valuable asset for most people. And if something catastrophic would happen to your home, it would be nearly impossible for most any of us to manage that type of a loss without insurance. And
Yep.
so insurance is required if you have a mortgage. They're going to make sure that, because the bank literally owns your home, so they want to make sure that their assets are covered as well. And if you don't have a mortgage on your home, it's still, it's a very expensive asset that you would be kind of foolish not to insure.
Okay. So what are the most important items to have covered in a home?
Well, your homeowner's policy is, most policies across the country, and particularly in Nebraska here, are referred to as package policies. And they come standard with a lot of similar coverages. There are policy forms HO2, HO3, HO5. And the HO3 in particular and the HO5 are very similar. HO5 is kind of like the Cadillac policy and has a lot of frill coverages on it that a lot of people don't require or need. We at My Insurance prefer to sell an HO3 policy. If you're looking at your policy and you see those letters on there, an HO3 is the standard. And that's going to cover most anything any homeowner here in Nebraska is going to need. It's primarily the dwelling coverage, which is the structure of your home. Any separate structures that you might have, whether that be a pool or a deck or a shed, maybe a detached garage, fences, things like that. It's going to cover your contents, which are all of your personal possessions, your furniture, your clothing, anything that you have inside that home that you've brought to that home and you own. Those are your contents.
Okay.
One thing important to remember about insurance policies, the HO3 and the HO5 should always contain a full coverage, which would be replacement cost coverage. So if you have a fire in your home, for example, and your kitchen has burned, your cabinets and your stove and your refrigerator, all those things are going to be replaced with brand new like kind, versus they're not going to depreciate that and tell you that here's $10,000, good luck with your repairs.
Good.
So you want to make sure that your policy has replacement cost coverage. So in addition to that dwelling and separate structures and contents coverage, which are the most important and the most frequently used on claims, you also have coverage for personal liability. So if your dog bites someone or your child breaks a window with their baseball, or you hit a golf ball on a golf course and you hit somebody in the head or cause an accident, those types of things, anything you or a family member would do that could cause harm or damage to someone else or their property. So that's liability coverage. And that would be
A quick question on that, Mary. Sorry to interrupt, but does liability also cover, like, if you have friends over and somebody gets hurt on your property?
yes.
Is that part of the liability?
Yes, that is
Okay.
correct. That is correct. So that's more than just a frill coverage. That's a very important coverage to have. And typically that coverage is going to be 300,000. It's 100,000, 300,000, 500,000, or $1 million in some cases that you can purchase. And the general rule is the more you have financially, the more you have to protect. So if you don't want to be sued personally by someone, then you need to make sure that you have good liability coverage on both your home and your autos.
Okay.
In addition to that coverage, you have loss of use coverage. So for example, a lot of these people that have been displaced in the storms recently that we've had here, that loss of use coverage is imperative because they have to live somewhere else for the next 6 months to a year or even more. And so that loss of use coverage is covered up to a limit, and those limits will vary depending on the carrier and the type of policy you have. Some will cover for as long as you're displaced, some will cover up to a dollar limit, and some will cover up to a time limit. So again, something you might want to discuss with your agent if you're concerned about those issues. It's rare. We don't have tornadoes like that come through, thank goodness, very often.
Yes.
And it's rare that someone has a house fire where they have to live outside of their home, but those things do happen. And we see it more often in the insurance business, of course, because that's what we do. You may not
Sure.
have ever had that type of a claim yourself.
Right. So during that time, or not during the time, but in regards to that loss, shoot, what did you just call it? When they're
Loss
out of their
use coverage. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So is that like an optional thing as far as whether it's a time length, whether it's a dollar amount, or is it just each carrier has their specific thing?
Each carrier has their own coverage that is available on that policy. And some carriers will limit that coverage because that's a way to anytime you decrease coverage, you decrease cost.
Yes.
So if you're willing to pay more, you can get better coverage.
Okay. Yep. And I know that a lot of first-time home buyers will go for the lowest amount.
Well, and no one ever thinks they'll need it.
Yeah, that's true.
I always say that insurance is, it's it's partially emotional, it's partially a feel-good coverage because you want to put your head on the pillow at night and know that you're taken care of. If something were to happen, that unexpected event, you have enough coverage to survive that event in your standard of living.
So are there items that are excluded from coverage with homeowners insurance?
Absolutely. It is a package coverage and it's very comprehensive, but there are certain things that you either have to endorse onto the policy or buy a completely different policy to cover. Common endorsements that we have would be earthquake coverage. And in Nebraska, we have had some little tremors that thankfully have not caused much of any damage at all, but it's possible there is a fault line. So we could have a tornado or an earthquake event. Some people, it's very inexpensive because it's low risk. So some people choose to add that. People will add sewer and drain backup coverage, which we highly recommend and quote with every policy, because if you have sewage water that backs up through your sewer drain in your basement, in your laundry room, probably those areas, it's detrimental. I mean, you can't live in a space that has had sewage water. You have to tear out walls and carpet and everything and replace it all. So it doesn't cover everything. It comes in increments, but it is a good coverage to have, and it's one that we highly recommend because you never want to tell somebody that's not covered, you know.
Right,
And
right.
it is fairly common here because we all have basements, or most of us do.
Mm-hmm.
So service line coverage has become very popular. That's the line that goes from your house out to the street. And a lot of times that gets clogged with tree roots or other matter. And that's not because it's outside of your home, it's not covered under the policy itself. So that is an endorsement that is available. That can be a very expensive fix, especially if you have to tear up a driveway or something to get to it.
Right.
A lot of times people will insure their jewelry. That's very common. You know, if you have an expensive wedding ring or, you know, maybe grandma's brooch that you inherited or something, you want to make sure that that's insured. We have coverage for that that is available as an endorsement. Some policies will cover a minimal amount of jewelry, but the deductible applies. So that coverage isn't really something that you want to count on if you have a nice piece of jewelry or art. Art is another example. If
Sure.
you have musical instruments that are high value or anything out of the ordinary, it's always good to ask your agent if that's covered under the policy. Things that are not covered, flood is the most important thing. If you feel like if you are in a flood zone, you're probably required to purchase flood insurance by your mortgage company. If you're close to a flood zone, you might think that might be a good idea to get a flood insurance policy just in case. And you know, it's like 75% of all flood occurrences that happen in the United States are not in flood zones. So that's something really important to remember. A few years ago, we had, you know, the flood here in Elkhorn. And so a lot of people experienced flood in their homes, in their properties, and they were not covered. They didn't have flood insurance. And so they were relying on the generosity of the government to help them out. And in many cases, they got only a small fraction of what their actual damage was because they did not have a flood insurance policy. So something to keep in mind. And it's expensive if you are in a flood zone, but if you're not in a flood zone, it's pretty fairly inexpensive to purchase. If you're not in a flood zone, you can buy specific amounts. So you might say, I just want $100,000 worth of flood damage coverage. And so that way, if I get a couple of feet of flood water in my basement, I've got enough to take care of that. Might not damage your entire home, but you've got enough resources there to repair what you need to repair. But that is a
Okay.
big exclusion on homeowners insurance.
I've heard that from people that have been flooded, that
Mhm.
they didn't have the coverage they thought they had.
Right. Your
So,
homeowners insurance policy has limited coverage for water. It has to be a sudden or accidental surge of water, usually from a broken pipe or a malfunctioning dishwasher, refrigerator, or something like that. But the key is sudden and accidental. If it's seeping in or leaking in through your walls, that is considered groundwater damage. So, or would have to be covered by flood if it's a flood incident. So those types of coverages are excluded from homeowners insurance.
so is there like an endorsement you can get for the groundwater leakage, or
Uh,
it's just completely not
it is
included?
not covered. So there are a
Okay.
number of things that are considered to be maintenance, care, and upkeep of your home. And so if you have an issue that you could personally resolve yourself, maybe you waterproof your basement, or you make sure your windows are sealed tight, that your foundation is secure. That's part of being a homeowner and taking care of your home. Now,
Mhm.
there are situations where, there's nothing you can do about it. And sometimes those things are covered depending on the type of incident and the policy language. Like, for example, maybe your neighbor has a swimming pool that collapses and floods your house. There could be some coverage for those types of events. Again, the key there is sudden and accidental, not
Mhm.
something that occurs over time.
Sure, makes sense. And basically, you can't defer maintenance in hopes that your insurance will pay it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very good. Um, so I know the biggest thing, two things that we hear about a lot from our clients is roof problems and fences. So I've heard several people say that, well, a third of their fence went down, but their insurance company wouldn't cover it. Is that because they didn't have an endorsement, their deductible was too high, or is there a certain amount of fencing that needs to go down before it's covered?
It's all deductible driven. So if you
Okay.
have a $1,500 deductible, you just need to call contractors, somebody who's going to come out and put a few fence posts in and put that fence back up for you. And again, that's one of those things where it's taking care of or maintaining your home. You have
Mhm.
a broken window, that's not an insurance claim. You need to call and have that repaired. Even if you have a few shingles that blow off your roof, the insurance company is not your first call. It's a contractor to come out and repair those shingles. And you're seeing deductibles that have moved much higher over the years. I'm sure you can remember $500 deductibles, $250 deductibles, and now
Right.
most people have at least a $1,500 deductible. And we're moving into the season where people are having 2,500 and 5,000 and even percentage deductibles. And so with those
Wow.
higher deductibles, your first call is not going to be to your insurance carrier. It's going to be to someone to repair that problem.
Makes sense. Yep. So, with the roof, when somebody is having, after, let's just say a hailstorm, because that's pretty common in this area. So once we've had a hailstorm, do they need to be seeing water leaking in to have it checked for a claim? What determines when they should call you?
Well, they should always call a contractor first. Have a
Okay.
contractor look at the damage or potential damage. And most of the contractors from this area, and it's important, that's why it's very important to use local contractors.
Mhm.
They all work with the insurance carriers, and they know what is a claim and what is not a claim. And they have the ability to assess that damage and determine whether or not it's likely that you have enough damage to file a claim. Um, at that point, you can call your agent. We always recommend that you call your agent. You don't just call the carrier and file a claim. Ultimately, you will call the carrier to file a claim, but there are so many factors that go into that, and that's why you have a personal insurance agent to, visit with you about what your best options are. If you have a $1,500 deductible and your roofing contractor says, well, you don't have enough damage here to warrant a whole new roof, you've got about $20,000 or $2,000 worth of damage. Well, you're only going to get $500. Now you're going to have a $500 claim because it's $2,000 minus your $1,500 deductible. You're going to have a $2,000 claim on your record. So if you don't repair that damage, so your out-of-pocket cost is $1,500, then 3 months from now or next year or 2 years from now, when you have another event, a hail event, they're going to ask you about that claim. Was that previous damage repaired? If it wasn't repaired, then they're going to discount the current claim at that time by the amount of the previous claim. So it's always good to discuss with your agent, what's the likelihood of another event happening? And have you had a previous event? That's another issue that is always worrisome for us as agents is, frequency of claims. Somebody, there's a hailstorm that comes through and they see their neighbors are getting new roofs, so they call and file a claim, and they don't have enough damage to have a new roof, and they neglect to repair the small damage that they have. And 3 months later, it hails again, so they file another claim. And now you've got somebody with two claims, and maybe they're getting a new roof, maybe they're not getting a new roof, but chances of them getting non-renewed are much higher. We don't want to see people get non-renewed from their carrier, and we hate those phone calls where somebody's looking for coverage because they've been non-renewed with their carrier, and we can't help them because they have multiple claims. So
wow, so it's not an easy thing for them to get insurance then.
correct. People need to be aware that your insurance is for those claims that you can't sustain yourself. You can't financially sustain that. You can't pay for that yourself. It's over and above what you're financially capable of, catastrophic, in other words.
Right. And that is why one of the things that I personally talk with new buyers is making sure that they've got money set aside for things that will happen, because they will happen. And that's exactly it. So I've got two questions. One, if a buyer closes on a house and say a year down the road has major damage to their roof, if the previous seller had filed a claim, received money, but did not repair the roof, then does this buyer, this new homeowner, get penalized because that other person did not repair the roof?
The coverage would likely not be there for that person on their current insurance policy, because your policy covers the period that you have owned the home. And insurance carriers and the roofing companies have become very savvy. They use drones, and they use just kind of like the Google Maps where you can see, or Google Earth, you can see. They're sending out drones now that periodically that look at different areas. They know the dates of storms. They know what damage was involved in certain zip codes. And so if you've got a roof that is not new, it's 10 years old, and you haven't had the roof checked for damage before you purchase that home, then you are taking that risk on yourself that there could be potential previous damage. Now, that's not to say that the damage was significant enough to warrant a replacement. If they never filed a claim on that, then there's no record of any damage. And so even if it's a question of whether this damage could have potentially been there before or not, they'll usually, favor the customer or the client in that situation and replace the roof if there's a new incident that comes along. But
Okay.
if it's obvious that the damage is old, if it's obvious that the roof is old and it's been through several different storms in that zip code over the past 10 years, then there could be some concerns with whether or not coverage would exist. Because again, insurance is not meant to pay for someone else's damage or lack of upkeep. It's meant to cover existing current damage from an event.
Okay, very good. Well, we are getting close to the end of our time, and I wanted you to go ahead and talk a little bit about what you're seeing currently happening with insurance companies.
Sure. It's everybody knows in the past couple of years, if you are a homeowner, you know any homeowners, you've heard people talk, insurance has become very, very expensive, crazy, ridiculous expensive. And insurance carriers in a variety of states for different reasons, mostly weather related, have had severe losses. And so they're all running at a loss ratio. So they're having to do dramatic things to be able to stay in business. Some carriers have left particular states that it's no longer cost effective for them to do business in. We've seen this in California, we've seen it in Texas, we've seen it in Florida. We've had carriers that have all but shut down. Their underwriting standards are extremely severe, so that it's difficult for us to find placement for people who have any issues at all, whether it's claims, previous claims. In some cases, it's even the type of car that you drive, or your insurance risk score, which is credit based. So there are all kinds of reasons why at this point I would recommend, especially for realtors, if you're listing a home for a seller, or if you have a buyer who's interested in purchasing a home, it's important to get almost a pre-approval for your insurance like you do for your mortgage loan. If you have a home in mind, if you're selling a home, let's get an insurance quote for that home and see what's showing up on that home. If there's anything there that could be detrimental for a new buyer. If the roof is over 10 years old, is that going to cause a problem for the buyer being able to obtain insurance coverage? If you can't obtain insurance coverage, you can't close the transaction.
Right.
So, right. And or even the buyer, is it they may be a first-time home buyer, but unbeknownst to them, they may actually have a property claim that they don't realize because they've never owned a home before. They don't think that they have a claim. But if they had their golf clubs or their purse stolen out of their car, they may have filed a claim against their renter's insurance. That is a property claim. They may own a couple of pit bulls and you don't know this. And that might be a deterrent for them finding homeowners insurance. Different companies have different risk tolerances, and you eliminate your opportunities when any of those adverse risks appear. So it's always good to know upfront what you're dealing with.
Yeah, that's so interesting that even breeds of dogs, because you don't, I mean, it's liability, but you don't necessarily think about that when you've raised this dog as a puppy and
Sure.
it's just so sweet and everything.
It's your
But
family member.
it's the general breed though. It's not their personal dog.
Correct.
Yeah.
But some carriers will limit certain types of breeds. And so
Mhm.
that eliminates the opportunity to have your coverage with that carrier because of that.
So I know we're talking homeowners. There's auto insurance, and you had mentioned earlier when you and I were talking about the fact that some carriers are even requiring auto and home to be bundled. So that eliminates people from having their good insurance with their car now to having to bundle it, correct?
Correct. So because of those loss ratios that insurance carriers are experiencing, the auto is less of a risk um, than the homeowner's insurance is right now with all the weather related claims. So they're wanting the auto insurance to balance out that risk. They want the entire household. And so
Makes
for,
sense.
for that reason, for example, if you drive a certain type of vehicle, for example, Kias and Hyundais have become increasingly harder to insure. And some carriers are limiting that coverage. They won't cover them at all, or they'll only cover them with certain types of coverage. And this is again because of the high loss ratio with theft. So they're easily stolen, and for that reason, it's become a kind of a norm in the insurance world that those cars are not. Nobody wants to insure them. So for that reason, if you're a potential home buyer and you drive a Kia, there again, you've limited the number of options you have for homeowners insurance. And if it's not to say that we can't insure your home, but if we have to insure your home by itself, you will likely be put in a risk company or have a higher premium because we can't bundle that coverage. So you lose out on
Very
the
interesting.
discount, but you also lose out on the opportunities for better carriers.
Right. And we all know that everybody's looking for the best price and they
Right.
bundle it.
And sometimes we find that you sacrifice maybe a little bit better price on your auto insurance. Maybe you have coverage with your mom and dad still, and they're happy to pay your insurance premium. Or you've been with the carrier for a long time and you have a pretty good premium, and maybe the carrier that we found is best for your homeowner's insurance is a little more expensive than the carrier you currently have for your auto insurance. But when you package it all together, you have to look at the overall price. So the home by itself is this price, or the home with the auto is this price, a much discounted price. And you may end up paying a little bit more monthly for your auto insurance, but you're saving a bundle on your homeowner's insurance.
Good job.
Mhm.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to explain homeowners insurance to us. I have found it very helpful and learned a few new things also. So if you want to give your information out so that people can contact you or one of the ladies that works for you, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, we are an all-female office. We have 3 other agents besides myself. Jen and Chris and Vicky are all very, very experienced, seasoned agents, licensed agents, and ready to help you. And our office is called My Insurance LLC. So it's myinsuranceomaha.com. And you can reach us, contact us through our website, or you can give us a call directly at 402-991-6688.
Very good. Thank you so much. And anybody wanting to have any questions answered about real estate can contact me at 402-798-4364, or you can send me an email at care@carehometeam.com. We appreciate you being with us today, or if you're listening in the future or watching on YouTube or Spotify, we appreciate you joining there also. In 2 weeks, June 18th, we will be talking about the buying process, just kind of giving a preliminary, here's the overall picture of what it looks like. So we look forward to seeing you again, and have a great day. Thank you, Mary.
Bye.